We are officially halfway through the fantasy football season. Week 9 is in the books, and we have quite the mid-season show coming up for you today. On today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast, Lucas Wenzel, Cameron, Lauren taking out with you tonight. Cameron, as we're halfway through the season, give me a grade, A through F, how you're feeling about your fantasy football season thus far.
I'd say a B. I started off really strong everywhere, and I've started to fade a little bit. Thanks to guys like Devontae Adams or Devonta Smith. Just personal vendettas against players right now.
A lot of guys that you may have come into the season high on.
Yep.
Or guys who are making major resurgences now. AJ Brown, a little bit of a slow start to the season. Now he's the wide receiver 2 on the season. That was the case for me in one of my leagues. We're going to go through a fun exercise on today's episode of how we would draft players, knowing what we know now at the beginning of the season, but also without knowing what's to come in the second half of the season. We're going to do a fantasy redraft of how we think the first 30 players should have gone in drafts this year. We're in for quite a treat on today's episode. If you haven't subscribed already, though, make sure you do that over on the audio podcast and turn on those notifications as well, so you know when all of our new podcasts are out. And if you're watching over on YouTube, hey there, good to see you. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you do that. And make sure you turn on post notifications over there as well, so you know when all of our video content is up, not just podcast content, but video content is up every single day. I said it already. We're going to redraft the 2023 fantasy football draft. I think we're going to see a major shakeup here. Yeah. Let's get into it. I'll explain some of the rules once we make the transition here, but let's dive on into the 2023 fantasy football redraft. All right, after all that fancy camera work, we are back. We're going to do the top 30 picks, as I mentioned, in our fantasy redraft. We're going to keep it very simple. It's top 30 picks. That's it. I don't know how much there is to it. PPR formats, we're going to redraft. Obviously, you see 10 teams on the screen if you're watching over on YouTube. Only 3 rounds, but that gets us to, there you go, the top 30 picks. This isn't necessarily a competition per se. It's kind of tough to just draft 2 separate teams with Cameron and I. But what we're going to do is we're going to alternate picks. We could do a snake style, but that just seemed counterintuitive with only 2 of us. So we're just going to alternate picks. Cameron, I am going to give you the first pick. I'm going to let you kick things off of who you think the first overall pick, knowing what we know today now for fantasy football and what is to come in the second half of the season. I'm going to let you pick who you think should have been the first pick in 2023 fantasy football drafts this year.
He was my 101 coming into the year. He's still my 101. I think Christian McCaffrey has to be the first pick. He has been electric. 20 plus PPR fantasy points in all but 2 games in which he played Dallas and Cleveland, who are 2 of the better run defenses. He was still running back 15 in both of those weeks. He's been a top 7 running back every other week since. I'm just going to read you these running back weekly finishes because it's ridiculous. Running back 2, 7, 5, 1, 15, 15, 5, 3. Right. I mean, he either wins you a week or he's just really good. I mean, it's been ridiculous. He's exactly what we remember, what he was before, the injuries, exactly what you were hoping for when you drafted him up there. So yeah, Christian McCaffrey still has to be the 101.
I would agree. He is definitely the 101. And with the scarcity we have now seen at the running back position this year, with Nick Chubb getting injured, we've seen Austin Eckler miss quite a bit of time. Saquon Barkley missed some time as well. It's very clearly he has been the guy. He's been outscored by only one other player in fantasy football this year, but I think he's very clearly the 101 should you have done it over. And you were right on coming into the season. He was your 101. You did not waste a breath saying it. And he is paying dividends on that this year. My pick now at pick number 2. This is, again, a fairly easy pick. He actually has an incredibly difficult end of season schedule. It's not all that great. Draws the Jets twice, Dallas as well, in the remaining stretch of the season after his week 10 bye. But my goodness, has Tyreek Hill been phenomenal this year. Tyreek Hill only has 2 games with less than 15 fantasy points this year. He only has one game with less than 9 targets. He only has 3 games with less than 88 receiving yards. He has more games of over 100 total receiving yards than he does less than 100 receiving yards. I mean, the man has been phenomenal. He is in arguably the most explosive offense in the NFL. Granted, they got contained by Kansas City, but all that to say, you look at coming up, even after the bye, you get Vegas, you get the Washington Commanders, you get the Tennessee Titans in there. The Baltimore Ravens, I know they've looked ferocious, but their secondary can be beat. Buffalo, we saw their secondary get beat yesterday. I mean, there are games where Tyreek Hill can still go off for 20 plus fantasy points, as we've seen. Only 2 games with less than 15 fantasy points. So yeah, he is my second pick. I think that is also a no-brainer. The first 2 picks are pretty locked in. Would you agree with that?
I would agree for sure. I actually think I'll transition myself into the next one because I think this next guy's locked himself into this top tier. And it's AJ Brown. He has been borderline historic with his streak of 130 plus receiving yards in 6 games. 125 plus receiving yards. Sorry, he had 127 in there. It was a disappointing game against the Rams when he was only the wide receiver 13. But
wow, what a bummer.
You mentioned it at the beginning of the year, about just AJ Brown having 2 rougher games, 11 points, 4 points to start the season. And since then, he has been everything you said about Tyreek, you could say about AJ Brown. Only 2 games under 15 fantasy points, more games with 100 plus receiving yards, only 3 games under 100 receiving. It is just crazy. This last week, he had a disappointing for AJ Brown 9 targets, 7 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. He was the wide receiver 7. That's been disappointing as of late. And it has been ridiculous. And I think the only worry about his playoff schedule is that the Eagles might get up so quickly, so early on these 3 teams he plays that he might not play the whole game. But he gets Seattle, the Giants, and the Arizona in the playoffs. Or in the fantasy football playoffs. I mean, that is just some ridiculously easy secondaries for them to pick apart. So yeah, AJ Brown's been great. Dallas Goedert now out 4 weeks, and then he gets that schedule. I just don't see any reason that he slows down.
Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, Seattle, Giants, Arizona, the Giants again. Those are all going to be either high-scoring games or secondaries that can be taken advantage of, and you're 100% right. AJ Brown has cemented himself into this top 5 tier of wide receivers. And I would even say he's probably overtaken Devontae Adams at this point in his career.
100%.
And I think that'll be reflected in our draft if my rankings are any reflection of where you and I lie on specific players. But so far, you and I are in unison. Those are my top 3 picks off the board. I think this is where we might start to disagree a little bit.
I would agree. This is where it gets interesting.
My pick here is actually it's going to be another wide receiver. And I think people aren't fully grasping how good Stephon Diggs has actually been this year. I think originally they're like, I don't know, he's not going for these 30 plus games like AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill are. I don't know. You're looking at PPR formats, 26.2, 13.6, 19.1, 36, 24, 20, 17.8, 16, 22. I mean, we're looking at a guy who has more top 15 or top 6 finishes, than he does finishes outside of the top 15. Stephon Diggs has still been great. You look, even over the last 5 weeks, 11 targets, 16 targets, 12, 7. I mean, the guy has been phenomenal still. He has been nothing but consistent this year. And yeah, sure, you can complain about, his 13.6 in week 2, but he hasn't gone below 16 in any other week since. I mean, Stephon Diggs has been the definition of consistent. I see people complaining on Twitter about, Josh Allen isn't, feeding him the football in some moments. Sure, in some moments, but it's not like Stephon Diggs isn't getting the football and isn't making things happen with them. I mean, the man was on a 4-game streak of at least 100 yards between weeks 3, and let me do my math here. That would be week 7. 111, 120, 121, 100. Hasn't gone over 100 since, but I mean, when 5 of your first 6 games are over 100 receiving yards, I wouldn't be complaining if I was Stephon Diggs manager. So he is my 4th pick here. Did you have somebody different?
I did, but I did have Stephon Diggs at 5. So I'm right there with you of
Yep.
we need to appreciate how great Stephon Diggs has been. And he has been doing it for, a couple of years now with Josh Allen. It feels like as long as him and Josh Allen are together, he's got to be a top 5 option at the wide receiver position for fantasy.
I 100% agree. Let's keep it moving. Who would your pick have been here if not for Stephon Diggs? And I feel like we might agree on this one.
I'm going to go
Actually.
running back. It's Travis Etienne.
Yep.
And you just can't. I mean, the worry about Etienne for all of us was volume. I think we all knew he was very talented, right? I mean, that's been evident from his time at Clemson. That was evident, even in his second season last year. But it was, is this going to be a running back by committee that Doug Peterson said? And it has not. He is on pace for over 300 carries. He's on pace for 70 targets this season, right? I mean, in these last 4 weeks, it's helped that he scored 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. Obviously, that inflates your stats, but he's been running back 1, running back 2, running back 4, running back 5. And even in the games, the 4 games before that, these were his carry or attempt totals: 18, 12, 19, 20. I mean, he's getting elite usage right now, and he's doing well with it. And he's on a good offense that knows how to use him. I just don't really see him slowing down. He does not have a great schedule rest of the season, I will say. Right. He goes San Francisco, Tennessee, Houston, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, Tampa Bay, which are all disgusting. But if you, as I think he can kind of weather that storm just with how well he's been playing. And if you get to the championship, he gets Carolina in the fantasy championship. And Travis Etienne could drop a 30 burger for you against Carolina easily. So, yeah, I think he has to be number 4 with just what he's done so far and, just knowing where he's going to end up rest of the season.
I have no gripes with that because Travis Etienne would have been my 5th pick off the board then. So again, we just had Diggs and Etienne flipped. Now, this might be where it gets interesting because admittedly, I'm stuck between 2 players now. As I was making these rankings, I had not gotten the news yet. The news had not yet come out that Jamar Chase is dealing with a back injury. He actually would have been my pick here at 6. Now, might I regret that considering you look at his schedule coming up? My gosh. And what he's been able to do recently. Obviously, 52 points, 14, 25.2. Disappointing week against Buffalo. But Houston, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Kansas City through week 7. That is a phenomenal schedule coming up. So I was really tempted to take him on the outlook of his season. But with that lower back injury and the question marks I have, there is one guy who actually has a better schedule potentially rest of season than Jamar Chase does. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on my pick, who is going to be, pulling it up here, CeeDee Lamb.
Ooh,
with Dallas Cowboys. I'm getting maybe a little spicy here, but again, Jamar Chase would have been my pick. But CeeDee Lamb, he is starting to turn it on now. Again, a guy who was disappointing. Didn't score, only had 1 game of more than 15 fantasy points throughout the first 5 weeks. But now he's turned it on. 18.7, 41, 28.1. He's 30 targets over the last 2 weeks now. This offense clicks when they feed CeeDee Lamb the football. Mm-hmm. It took Mike McCarthy, 7 weeks to figure that out?
Yeah.
Which is kind of brainless if you ask me. But going forth, I mean, this is a team that's going to have to throw the ball to stay in games. Tony Pollard cannot run the football to save his life right now. I do not know what's going on with him. But again, the Giants, the Panthers, the Commanders, the Seahawks, the Eagles again, the Bills, Dolphins, Lions, Commanders. I mean, those are all teams that can be exposed in the secondary. Maybe with the exception to Buffalo. They've looked pretty buckled up as of recent, in Miami in week 16 potentially. But that's going to be a high-scoring game if you were to ask me. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna roll with CeeDee Lamb there based on what I've seen over the last 2 weeks. But again, I'm curious your thoughts because I think that might be a little bit of a hot take.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is a little bit higher. I have him down just a little bit farther. But honestly, yeah, I don't know. I don't hate it because you know how good he can be. You know what he's done. But yeah, I just have a couple other wide receivers and 1 running back ahead of him. But I do believe that he belonged within these 4 picks for sure.
The thing you're basically, this is the fun of the exercise is where you look at the beginning of the year, but then you also look ahead to what's in store for the rest of the season. We're looking back, but also projecting a little bit. And I'm going to favor his projection a little bit based on what I've seen the last 3 weeks and how they've been getting him more involved. I think there's just more question marks around some of these next few players. But I'm curious to see where you go next. Who would you take at 7?
So I am between 3 guys right here, but I think I am going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's actually averaging 20 fantasy points a game right now, which I thought was ridiculous.
That's incredible.
I think it's just the way that he plays in a PPR format of he catches the ball so much, and nothing's ever crazy flashy with him, but he's just so consistent, so solid, and it's so evident that he's the number one, just target weapon in this Lions offense. And even in a game where even in games where like David Montgomery's getting 30 rush attempts, even when Sam Laporta is going off, Amon-Ra is still getting 8 catches for 80 yards no matter what. And so just knowing how well he plays in this offense, knowing what he's done so far, I feel like he's worthy of this spot. I do feel like there's a couple guys I could have gone here with higher ceilings than Amon-Ra, but when you're consistently putting up 20 fantasy points a game, it's really hard to, that's a pretty high ceiling to begin with, so that's pretty hard to bet against.
I mean, yeah, Amon-Ra is nothing but consistent.
Yeah.
That is the name of his game. Amon-Ra St. Brown will give you consistency every single week. And yeah, he's very clearly the lead target getter for this Lions team. There's no questions about it. I mean, he's a target hog, 19 targets back in week 7. I mean, that doesn't tell you what kind of receiver he is. And again, all these numbers we were talking about with Tyreek Hill, he missed a game in here, but 102, 56, 124, 102, 108.
Yeah.
He's only had 2 games under 100 yards this year. So I agree. I'm fine with Amon-Ra there if you want to even take him ahead of Chase, who again now has question marks around him.
I do think that's the thing is I don't know, like watching him, he Chase went up for that catch yesterday and he came down so hard.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, is that something that's going to linger? Because if he comes back this next week and it's no problem, I do think he probably could have slid where CeeDee Lamb was. I do think, but where we're at right now with what we know, it's so close between these guys that we're nitpicking, and that's enough to kind of move him down, a couple spots.
And I think with my next pick, I think that's why I'm going to nudge Travis Kelce into being my next pick. I'm getting a little spicy here. Look, it's not too far off from where he was being drafted. And I know people who drafted Travis Kelce are like, dude, he has not been that same guy this year. And you're right. I mean, he hasn't been, the 18 plus point every single week kind of guy. But I mean, what more do you want from the guy? Mm-hmm. He's outscoring Mark Andrews, who's a tight end too, by 2 full fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
I mean, he is still a positional advantage when you have him. He only has 1 game, which was this past week in Germany, where he had less than 8 targets. The tight end 4, the tight end 3, tight end 14, tight end 4, tight end 1, tight end 1, 16, and then 32. So a little bit of a slide here, but this man is still a cheat code of a positional advantage. And when you bake in some of the injury risk with some of these guys or time that some of these guys have even missed, like, I would just rather take Travis Kelce than some of these guys we have coming up just based on the positional advantage. Now, I think who I think you're going to take next, I think there is a case for him to go ahead of Travis Kelce here, but honestly, Travis Kelce has still been a cheat code, just not as big of one as we saw last year. And that's because, we missed Mark Andrews for quite a bit of the year, and tight ends were, a dime a dozen, or not a dime a dozen, were, basically impossible to find last year. So it might be a little bit early for Kelce, but just looking at some of these guys and knowing the injuries that they sustained this year, time that they've missed, Travis Kelce's only missed 1 game and he still looked like the number 1 tight end. And all it would take is for this week, instead of being a dud this week, if he scored 15, 16 plus this week, you'd still be feeling pretty dang good about Travis Kelce.
For sure.
So who are you taking at 9 then?
I will admit I'm between 2 guys here. And I'll just say I'm between Jamar Chase and Alvin Kamara.
Uh-huh.
And I think they both have, Kamara missing those first 3 games. That does hurt, right? You knew he was going to be suspended. Taysom Hill's getting a little bit more involved, although, we've seen this, movie a couple times where I'm not like worried about it, but it's just it's annoying. Jamar Chase hurt his back. I mean, Jamar Chase effectively missed those first 2 weeks, except he was in your lineup with Joe Burrow dealing with a calf injury. But I think I am going to lean Jamar Chase here. I think they're so close. And obviously, this last game against Buffalo was a little bit of a disappointment. But Chase has yet to see less than 8 targets in a game. He's had 20, he's put up 26, he's put up a 52-point week. Jamar Chase is one of the few guys that can drop 40 multiple times in a year, and no one's going to be surprised about it, right? I think you got like Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, AJ Brown, the guys we mentioned right away, probably Justin Jefferson you can throw on there, who could do that same thing. But Chase is one of the very few guys who could go 12 for 203. Yep. And he could do it multiple weeks. And I think I don't remember now already if you mentioned the schedule that he has the rest of the season.
Yep.
But Houston, Baltimore, and then you get Pitt, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Minnesota, and Pitt again. That is just so juicy. And I don't see, I don't see a world where, with the way Burrow is starting to play again, where he would ever fall outside the top 10. So I would go Jamar Chase here.
He would have been next in my picks here. I don't think I could have let him fall any further. Mm-hmm. Again, we'll see how long this back injury keeps him out. He's labeled day to day as of this recording. It could turn into something, but based on, again, what we know right now, which I can't believe we're getting uncertainty in the middle of this draft. I think this is about where Jamar Chase should belong given the context around him. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock in the other guy that you were considering, and it is Alvin Kamara. I mean, it is unfathomable how good he has been since coming back from suspension. He was a guy that I talked about early in the season. Well, not early in the season, preseason. I made a YouTube video on basically 6 guys that your league mates are scared of drafting, but you shouldn't be scared of drafting them. And Alvin Kamara made that list for me. I mean, you just look at it. It's incredible what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He has never finished lower than the running back 24, and he has 3 finishes inside of the top 7, and then an RB15 finish in there as well. He's getting plenty of rushing attempts, 22, 19, 17, 17 in 4 of his 6 games back. Massive amount of targets, 14, 3, 8, 14, 5, and 5. Has been less and less involved, but still 51 receiving yards, 44 receiving yards in the last 2 weeks. And you're looking at all these games. I mean, he's a PPR machine, right? Mm-hmm. Last week, his RB11 or the 11 fantasy points was the fewest of the season by 6.4 fantasy points. A man hadn't scored less than 17 fantasy points all season since his return. And he's just a PPR machine. I think you have to lock him in here again with how scarce the running back position has been. Only 3 running backs here, but man, I think this is the point where you have to look at Alvin Kamara and say, you know what? Even with missing 3 games, with how scarce the position has been this year, I think he might have been worth it at that pick because you could have patched it up with other running backs from the waiver wire.
For sure. Yeah, I think averaging 20 points a game. He looks like 2020 Alvin Kamara right now.
He does. 100% does. We're going to take a quick break. We got through the first 10 picks. We'll get through the next 20 in the back half of the episode. But let's take a quick break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back, and we are going to fly through the next 20 picks in the last 30 minutes of the show here. We hit the 1-2 turn in a 10-man league. We're on the 11th player off the board right now. We'll fly through the rest of them, but Cameron, honestly, if I were on the board, I think my pick would be pretty clear to me. I'm curious who you think should be going off the board here at pick 11.
I find that interesting that you say it should be clear, because for me right now, I don't know which direction I want to go at all. I am between a lot of players. I could see myself going a lot of directions, but I think I'm going to pick this guy because he just holds such a near and dear spot in my heart, and that's Keenan Allen.
Oh, fascinating.
been a Keenan Allen, he's been one of my champions for a while now. Allen is averaging 21.3 PPR fantasy points per game. That's fifth right now in the NFL. Obviously, it's inflated a little bit by his 45-point game against Minnesota, but still only single digits in one game so far. He's seen at least 9 targets in all but one game, 9, 10, 25, 11, 9, and 10. These last 2 games have been a little more disappointing. I think this Chargers offense as a whole has struggled over these last 2 weeks. And, it's not necessarily going to get easier for them as far as schedule goes, but I'm still a believer in Justin Herbert. I'm a believer in Keenan Allen moving forward. So just from what we've seen so far, I think this is something that is going to continue. If Mike Williams was still in the picture, I don't think I'd be as high on him rest of the season, but knowing Josh Palmer just went on IR, it's going to be him and Quentin Johnston. I think it's Keenan Allen's going to see a lot of targets coming up. So I have Keenan Allen at this turn, and it might be a little high for him, but that's where I'm going to take him.
This is about the range I had him though.
Mm-hmm.
I only had 2 other guys ranked ahead of him. And I know I said my next pick was pretty crystal clear. The more I'm thinking about it, the more it really isn't. And I think I am going to lean Keenan Allen's teammate, Austin Eckler.
Ooh, interesting.
Now here's the thing. Here's where it gets messy though, because now we start getting into these studs who have missed time.
Mm-hmm.
We start getting into these studs who either had slow starts to the season or missed time, or have just been flat out disappointing, but do you want to take the production that they've been giving you?
Yes.
And I'm just a believer that there have been so many guys that you've been able to add off the waiver wire this year where you could have survived without 3 weeks of Austin Eckler.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's been, uninspiring since returning. I mean, still 23 fantasy points this last week, kicked off the season with 26.4 fantasy points, only has 1 game with less than 5 targets this year, and only 1 game without a touchdown this year, 2 games without a touchdown this year, sorry. And we're accustomed to Austin Eckler scoring touchdowns. Yes. So part of me is like, you know what, with no Mike Williams, now you got Josh Palmer out this week. We'll see how Austin Eckler does on Monday Night Football tonight when this comes out tomorrow morning. We'll see. Maybe this pick ages like rotten milk, but I don't know, man. There's something about it where I'm just like, you know what? I could have survived without Austin Eckler for 4 weeks. And with how thin the running back position is, I think I would still take Austin Eckler here over some of these other guys who have just been flat out disappointing with their fantasy production, or have also, missed 3+ games, or just have been uninspiring the first 3 games of the season, but have looked really good since. So I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts. How do you balance out this dynamic of getting into this range of guys who have missed time, who have had 4 straight bad weeks to start the season, but are turning it on? Like, how are you making your decisions in this range? Because part of me is like, you know what? I'm looking at Austin Eckler's situation, and there's nothing that tells me that he shouldn't be a top 5 running back rest of season.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at is, he's bounced back from the injury. Yeah, you missed 3 games, but would I rather have a guy who's giving me 12 points a game, and played every game, or would I have rather had to go with the guy for the waiver wire who got me 8 for those 3 games he missed, and then be getting that 16 points a game every week heading into the championship? And I think I lean with you where you're at with Austin Eckler of, you know what, if I had to forfeit, a couple fantasy points, 4 fantasy points a game over another guy for 3 weeks, I'd rather have Austin Eckler. And I'm actually going to go the same direction as you with my next pick. I'm going to take Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
Who missed 3 games, but is still, he's averaging 17 fantasy points a game. He's, after week 1, he went 27 points against Arizona, got hurt, missed 3 games. And he's gone 13, 18, 15, 14, seen 24, 21, 36, and 16 carries in those games. Seeing, at least 4 targets in every game. Now, Daniel Jones is out. And you know what that means? Since Saquon Barkley's on a franchise tag, they are going to run him until the wheels fall off. He is this offense. They are not going to give him breaks unless he physically cannot go. But yeah, it's very difficult right now. And another guy, in this area that I keep wanting to say is Justin Jefferson, right?
Right.
I think one of the differences with Jefferson is he hasn't come back yet. He could miss another 2 weeks, and that's just how it's going to go. And obviously he's got, the quarterback situation and everything.
Right.
But I think knowing that Barkley and Eckler are back healthy and playing well, I think is something that gives you the confidence of, okay, they missed 3 weeks, but at least we know rest of the season they're good to go.
I mean, that's it, because admittedly, Justin Jefferson has been higher on my board. I have taken guys who are actually lower on my board ahead of him, because every time I keep coming up to him and I want to pull the trigger and say, it's Justin Jefferson.
Yep.
I just can't, because I have to remember Kirk Cousins isn't there. Justin Jefferson hasn't been activated from IR yet. Sure, his 20-day practice window could be open as soon as Wednesday, but then he still potentially has 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they have winnable games coming. They beat the Atlanta Falcons without him, with Josh Dobbs being traded to the team on 5 days.
They're 4-0 without him.
They're 4-0 without him.
Yeah.
Like, the Vikings can win these games without Justin Jefferson. So it's no guarantee that he comes back right away. But what would you do? Be honest with me. What would you do to ensure that your first round pick, no matter what, would have at least 24 fantasy points in every single game through the first 4 weeks of the season?
No,
with at least 13 plus 12 plus targets in 3 of those games, with 150 plus in 3 of those games. Part of me is like, I feel stupid for not taking Justin Jefferson until now, but there's a chance, he's going to miss 7 straight games.
Yep.
I don't think I can let him drop anymore, man. I just can't.
I don't think I blame you.
I just can't. I keep looking at who's next on my list, and I don't think I can justify any of them ahead of Justin Jefferson and what he's been able to provide you through the first 4 weeks of the season. I know you've been struggling ever since, but after what I saw Josh Dobbs do on 5 freaking days with the team, I don't think he's going to have a hard time picking up this Kevin O'Connell pass-happy offense. Because you want to know what the offense is? It's get Justin Jefferson the ball in space. And what do you think Josh Dobbs can deliver an accurate football? So that's it. I'm going to take him. I'm going to move on. And I don't care if people disagree with me. People might actually think that's probably too low, but I think this is the cutoff point where everybody I look at afterwards, I don't think I could justify taking ahead of Justin Jefferson, even if I knew he was going to miss 5 to 7 straight games.
Yeah.
Who are you going with next year? Because again, I think Justin Jefferson was the elephant in the room. I finally identified it, but now it feels like a crapshoot from here.
Oh, it feels gross now. It feels like there is. I could
so
make
many different guys you could take. Yeah,
I can make a case for so many. I can make a case against so many, and the guy I'm going to pick here is a bet on what is to come, and so I'm going to take Breece Hall here. Breece Hall effectively missed 4 games, right? I mean, just coming back, getting healthy, but 20 points in 3 straight weeks. With Zach Wilson at quarterback, they're going to keep leaning on Breece Hall because this team wants to win. This team believes that they can get in this position where Aaron Rodgers can come back and they can win. His receiving work has been outrageous over the last couple of weeks. Last 2 weeks, it was 9 targets last week for 76 yards, 5 targets for 54 the week before. He is playing 66% of snaps, right? This is his backfield now. Dalvin Cook, Michael Carter are pretty much irrelevant, seeing 22, 12, and 12 on carries, scoring touchdowns. I'm gonna take the bet on Breece Hall. I think there's a lot of guys that we're gonna name who have had much better first halves, who are probably the safer pick.
Yep.
But I want to bet on upside moving forward with Breece Hall.
Now, Breece Hall was next on my list. I'm glad you took him there because I know, again, he's a guy who's had a slow start to the season, but as of this recording, he's giving you 3 straight of 20 plus. I could make it 4 straight tonight against the Chargers. We'll see if he does. I think that's totally within the realm of possibility.
And then he's got a good schedule coming for it.
Right. And Breece Hall could be the guy, where we look back on this and it's like, holy crap, really? We took Breece Hall in the middle of the second round in a redraft, like in a redo draft of the season. Like, he really should have been going ahead of Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Like, he's one of those guys with immense upside in the second half of the season. And you're right. I think we could look really stupid for not taking him sooner. I absolutely love that pick there. This is where I think we get a lot of question marks now.
It's so great. It's just
because what you're doing is you're looking at guys who have phenomenal first halves, and are subject to take massive declines in the second half of the season. That's kind of where we're at now. We still have a few guys who got off the slow starts at the start of the year. They're looking to turn it on, but I'm gonna take the most sure thing, and that has been Josh Allen this year. I'm gonna be the first one to take a quarterback off the board.
Okay.
This is all about certainty. This is all about certainty. Josh Allen, the quarterback one on the season, he has been phenomenal. He has not scored less. He's only scored 2 games less, than 22 fantasy points this year. He only has 2 finishes outside of the top 10 quarterbacks this year. His inside of the top 10 finishes, quarterback 7, 8, 1, 2, 4, 2, 4. Nothing but consistent. I know it hasn't always looked great on the NFL football field, but in fantasy football, you have gotten nothing but stability from Josh Allen. He's in the MVP running this year. And again, knowing what you get from all these guys, knowing, okay, this is what you get through the first 9 weeks, but seeing some of these trends that these other guys are on, I'm just concerned. And Josh Allen is the sure thing I know I will be getting. So give me Josh Allen. I think he's going to be the quarterback one rest of the season. I think he could easily win the MVP this year as well if he turns it on the second half of the season.
For sure.
Is quarterback too early for you here?
It is a little bit too early for me personally. I had them closer to the end of the third round, but I think that's
end of the third.
So I think that's a preference thing. I've never I've never been able to pull the trigger, before
this early in quarterbacks.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That's fair.
I don't disagree, especially when you're talking about certainty. Everybody left is going to be up in the air. Josh Allen, what you're getting out of him every single week. You have that positional advantage. Him, Herbert, and Hurts are the only quarterbacks averaging over 20 fantasy points a game right now, and Josh Allen's at 24.5. So, that's probably a 5 to 6 point, gap you have on your opponent every single week, comparable to Travis Kelce. So I'm not against the pick. It's just, I think personally, I've always been, taking quarterbacks later.
Oh, and I have too, but I think my strategy with always taking quarterbacks later has been, I'm assuming everybody is going to give me everything that they can. Like I'm not expecting injury. I'm not expecting second half declines out of anybody. I'm like, if everybody is ready to go, if I get a full season out of these guys, what am I going to get? And most times I would prefer other players to a quarterback, but now knowing what we do, Josh Allen has been such a sure thing this year. I don't think this is necessarily a lesson of take quarterbacks early. But at the same time, there's 4 guys that you can bank on taking in the first 4 rounds. And Josh Allen has always been one of those guys. So I'm fine taking him right here.
For sure.
All right. Who are you taking next? Because it's not a quarterback.
No. And I think some people are going to disagree with it, but I'm going to go Derrick Henry here.
Really? Oh, okay. I need to hear your explanation on this one.
So Derrick Henry, I know, it was up and down. It's, Tyjae Spears coming in. He was running back 14, 13, and 66. But over the last 5 weeks, he's gone running back 7, 26, 5, 12, running back 5. So he's had 4 top 12 finishes in the last 5 weeks. His upcoming schedule is Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, and then he gets Carolina, Indianapolis, Miami, Houston, Seattle, Houston.
The fact that he gets Houston twice in the fantasy playoffs is,
and he gets Carolina. They have the second easiest running back schedule rest of the season.
Yeah.
He's been, with Will Levis now the last 2 weeks, he's had 22 and 17 carries. He's had 4 targets in each game. So he's getting receiving work. He played 65% of snaps. He only played 49% of snaps against Pittsburgh, but still saw 17 carries and 4 targets. He's getting the work. He's getting the usage. I think they're going to continue to rely on him. And now with an easier schedule coming up, I mean, he's still averaging almost 16 fantasy points a game. He's still top 10 in fantasy points per game, running back 8 overall. So yeah, I think I go Derrick Henry here.
And looking at my list now, I think I do have Derrick Henry slightly too low on my list because I think you're 100% right. I think you look at that playoff schedule with the volume uptick. I mean, it's probably not going to produce results over the next 2-3 weeks, but man, you look at weeks 13 to 17 and there's a chance Derrick Henry gives you 18, 19, 20 plus in all 4 of those games. So I don't hate that. He was lower on my board.
And I think he'd be lower for most people. I think I just wanted more of a sure thing, right? You talk about that with Allen. I think that's kind of what we're going to get with Derrick Henry.
I'm honestly okay with that. And I'm going to take another sure thing at quarterback, and I'm going to go Jalen Hurts here again, quarterback 2 on the
Interesting.
season. Again, at this point, I'm looking at guys where it's like you either gave me flops in the first half of the season, or you're starting to tail off here, and I have major concerns for you in the second half of the season. I just don't have that with Jalen Hurts. I know the Eagles haven't looked great, but man, this dude has not had a finish outside of the top 10 quarterback since week 1. 4, 9, 6, 3, 2, 5, 5, 3. Nothing but consistency. Jalen Hurts, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. I mean, at this point, it's basically a lock for him to get a brotherly shove in every game for a touchdown. Buy in week 10, sure, but I mean, you get hyper competitive games coming up with Kansas City, Buffalo, 49ers, the Cowboys. Then he wraps up with Seattle, the Giants, and the Cardinals. The second half of the season schedule is great. There are going to be plenty of ball games where he's going to need to throw and put up points. Again, taking the surefire thing here because I'm looking at the rest of my board, and it's a bunch of guys I don't know if I can trust second half of the season or have missed time in the first half. I feel like I'm a broken record, but at this point, I'm taking the sure thing, and it's been Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. But I also don't mind Derrick Henry between those two. So, you have any gripes with Jalen Hurts there? Again, I know it's more of a preference thing, but again, I think for me, it just comes down to certainty, and you're getting a top 2 lock at the position.
For sure. No, I would agree with that.
All right, let's start wrapping up the second round here. Who would you have at the 209?
I hate that I'm saying this. I really do. I feel like I got to go Adam Thielen.
Wow. I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
It is so disgusting. But we're talking about a guy who's averaging almost 19 fantasy points a game. Wide receiver 9 in points per game. The usage, the targets have been ridiculous since week 1. 9, 14, 8, 13, 13, 11, and then he only had 6 this last week. I mean, I know you get, so the schedule is Chicago, Dallas, Tennessee, Tampa, then New Orleans, Atlanta, Green Bay, which isn't great, and then finishes with Jacksonville. So not a beautiful schedule. But Bryce Young's got to throw to someone, and it's Adam Thielen. The worry with Adam Thielen is he going to slow down? Is there the drop off coming? Is he going to get hurt? But it hasn't looked like it.
No,
I mean he's still getting it done at 33 years old. And knowing what we know, the fact that he went 20, 31, 15, 27, 28 fantasy points in weeks 2 through 6, and knowing that that's a possibility coming up. I got to take Thielen here. I feel so gross saying it. I feel so disgusting saying it. And maybe I should have gone, maybe a couple different ways here, but I think Adam Thielen's the guy I got to go with.
And I don't hate it. That's the thing. I don't hate it.
Yeah.
It's just really gross. It's not who I would have gone with, because I think at some point that volume has to tail off, but you're right. Bryce Young has had to throw to somebody, and it's been Adam Thielen. So I don't mind it. I really don't. But I think I'm going to roll with a guy who has been just as hot the first half of the season. Again, at a position that's been very few and far between. And we might have our concerns for him in the second half of the season. But if you would have told me I could have gotten Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, he was
where I did. I mean, again, it's tough to justify here because he's really fallen off here. 2 weeks outside of the top 20 running backs, 6 and 10 in week 7 and 8. Came back, was running back 12 this week of 14.5. But I mean, I don't mind the matchups with Vegas, the Jets, the Commanders. Then you get Tennessee, but then you get the Jets and Dallas, Baltimore. I mean, the second half of the season schedule isn't great, but as long as he's in this Miami Dolphins offense, I'm not counting out Raheem Mostert.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you were to tell me I was getting a top 3 running back for the first half of the season at the end of the second round of my fantasy drafts, I find a really hard time passing up Raheem Mostert here.
For sure.
But this is one where, again, it's much more front loaded on the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a problem with that, I don't mind at all, because I think there are a few other running backs you could have gone here, and they're probably going to be some of the next few players off the board for me, honestly.
Yeah. With this next one, I'm going to be honest. There's 3 players I'm between, and I'll just give them to you. It's Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Josh Jacobs. And Puka Nacua.
Those are literally the next three I have as well.
And I think for me, I'm going to go with Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Because of the positional advantage, the fact that as a tight end, yes, he missed week 1, so did Travis Kelce. He's only had one game under double digits in PPR, which from a tight end, there's nothing more you can ask for.
Yep.
The fact he's had 2 20+ point games, he's averaging almost 16, 15 and a half points per game. Yeah, 15.6 points per game right now. He's a point ahead of TJ Hawkinson. What is he ahead of? Cole Kmet's, though, tight end 5 right now. He's got 3.5 points ahead of him. It's he's as close to Travis Kelce as you're going to get right now. And he's consistent. And this Ravens team looks awesome. So I have no doubts about him moving forward.
Nothing else to add on to that because I agree. He would have been my next pick off the board. And again, you name my 3 guys. It's Mark Andrews. Josh Jacobs is my next pick. Mm-hmm. But then again, I'll make your decision easy because I think you'll probably go Puka Nacua unless you pull a fast one on me. But Josh Jacobs, I know it's been a slow start to the season. It's been bad. Why can't I? There's Josh Jacobs. I'm like trying to pull up Josh Jacobs on Sleeper. It wasn't good, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't good. 9, 11 the first 3 weeks of the season. But then you get 28, 20, 11.3, 5.1, 16.8, 21.8. Like Josh Jacobs on the season is the RB4 in PPR formats.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing it on the back of gobs of targets. He didn't draw any last week against the Giants, but I mean, the Raiders were also absolutely blowing the pants off of the Giants this last week. So there wasn't much need for Josh Jacobs to be involved in the receiving game. When he got 26 carries for 98 yards, the man is a volume machine. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I think I probably should have taken him here ahead of Raheem Mostert. But again, you look at the first half of the season, Raheem Mostert, has gotten you probably a top 3 standing in your league. Josh Jacobs hasn't. But I think second half of the season, Josh Jacobs has a really good chance of turning on the Jets with the Raiders basically changing their coaching staff with Antonio Pierce running the show now. I think there's new life in this Raiders offense. I think there's new excitement. You saw them on the sidelines. They were having a lot of fun on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a team with new life. So I'm willing to bet on a team with new life in the second half of the season, and especially a guy who's currently the running back 4 in PPR formats in Josh Jacobs. So that'll be my pick there. And again, we already said your next pick, and it's going to be Puka Nacua.
Yeah, it has to be. The way he started off, 21-30, he had 12 and 31-20 to start the season. Obviously, it's been a little more disappointing with Cooper Kupp getting back in the fold, but I don't think that's necessarily because Cooper Kupp is playing again, right? I think the game against Arizona, you can blame it on, but then they got blown out early against Dallas, and Stafford hurt his thumb. This last game, they have a backup quarterback in. The reason I think Nacua and I think Kupp have fallen so far is obviously Kupp had the injury, but now Stafford is dealing with the injury, right? And we assume from everything we were being told he'll be back after the bye, but that's not necessarily a given at this point, and even if he is back, we've seen our fair share of thumb injuries now for quarterbacks.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily work out great, but just what he gave you to start the season, like we said with Mostert, it's enough where you're probably have at least 5 wins pretty much strictly because of Puka Nacua at this point. And, if you are drafting a guy in the first 3 rounds and you say he himself is going to gift you 5 wins, that's something that you can't take for granted. And I still think he's definitely going to produce over the next half of the season. We'll just see how much it actually turns out to be.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. I don't think he should go further than this based on the first 6 weeks that he gave you. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. Only one game with fewer than 20 fantasy points in the first 5 weeks. No finish lower than the wide receiver 15, or only one finish, lower than the wide receiver 15. And he was phenomenal. You cannot discount that. He was phenomenal. And like you said, he single-handedly won you a few of those weeks. This is where it gets interesting now, because now we're getting into the territory of either middling, low-end wide receiver 1s, high-end wide receiver 2s. Same with the running backs, and it's a bunch of basically upside picks on the rest of the season. You're basically taking what you've seen in the first half, and will it remain consistent throughout the season, or are you going to bank on the upside that we've seen from some of these guys as we go into the second half of the season? And And I think that's the way I'm going to lean for this next pick, which surprisingly is ahead of where he was going ADP wise this year. I think this is where I'm going to slot in Jonathan Taylor. I think this is where I'm going to slot him in.
I like that.
I think people were really scared to take him in the first 3 rounds if he was going to sit out the whole year, but obviously not the case now. Back in week 5, look, it took him a while to get integrated, but Jonathan Taylor up to a season high 74% of the snaps in week 9. Gets New England next week, which is a phenomenal matchup. They go into the bye. Tampa, Tennessee, you're not excited about. Cincy can be run on. Pittsburgh can be run on. The Atlanta Falcons you might have a more difficult time with, but then Vegas and Houston to wrap out the season in week 17 and 18 if you play into week 18 of the NFL season. I mean, these are at some point, Jonathan Taylor is just going to be the guy. 2 games of 18 plus rushing attempts over the last 3 weeks. I think he's going to be the primary over Zach Moss. It's been great to see him involved in the passing attack too. 4+ targets in 3 of his last 4 games. That excites me for Jonathan Taylor that he's getting involved in the passing attack too. So I think if Gardner Minshew is going to be at quarterback, look, it's going to be him and Michael Pittman that they're going to have to get the ball into the hands of in order to make plays. And I know he missed however many weeks. I know it was down, but I think if we're looking at second half of the season compared to what we're getting from some of these other guys, I think Jonathan Taylor has some of the most upside of the guys left on the board.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree with Jonathan Taylor. This is right where I had him as well. He was going to be my next pick, so I couldn't agree more here.
Let's move it on then. If Jonathan Taylor was going to be your next pick, he cannot be. So who would your next pick be then?
I'm actually going to go with another tight end. I'm going to go TJ Hawkinson here.
Yep.
I think he's close enough to Mark Andrews where they should be, right next to each other. Averaging almost 15 fantasy points per game. Only 1 game with less than double-digit PPR points. I mean, he's seeing eight targets a game every single game, except for that one game against Carolina where he didn't play very well. Obviously loses Kirk Cousins, which feels like a downer, but now gets Josh Dobbs and sees 12 targets in their first game. Josh Dobbs had the 3rd most targets to tight ends out of any quarterback through the first 8 with Arizona. He's going to get fed the ball. This is an offense that will use him a ton, even with Jefferson coming back. I think that Hawkinson has such a defined role, and he's the safety blanket in this offense. Whereas I don't think, like Alexander Madison, now obviously losing Cam Akers, the running backs just don't do that. And the tight end, TJ Hawkinson does. So I think Hawkinson here, just because he's a for sure thing, that's going to be another positional advantage. Whereas the rest of this, everybody else is, you're either dealing with a big injury or you're shooting for upside. So I'm going to go Hawk here.
I don't hate it at all. He was going to be one of my next 2 picks if you didn't take, I'm not going to spoil it because I think it might be a shock to you who it actually is. But yeah, I don't disagree with TJ Hawkinson at all. Again, he would have been next off the board if you took this guy. I'm going to take. This is about the range he should be going in, right within the range of Mark Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm actually going to take Davante Adams here.
Really? Wow, you're right. That is not where I thought you were going to go. This is where I have Adams as well, but I did not think you were going to take him here.
Look, man, I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for the new head coach life. I'm such a sucker for it because they were blowing the absolute pants off of the Giants. Davante Adams doesn't need to be targeted more than 7 times in that game. On the sideline, he was looking happy. He was thrilled Josh McDaniels got canned. I mean, that man was happy and dancing, and so he's just fine. All right. He'll be just fine. Again, games where where the Raiders are going to have to put up points. I mean, Miami, Kansas City. I think the Vikings won't have too difficult of a time with the Raiders. They get the Jets in week 10, but the Chargers, the Chiefs again, then a great matchup with the Colts. I mean, these are games where if Davante Adams isn't involved, well, then the Raiders are going to get their pants blown off. So Davante Adams is going to have to be involved in the second half of the season. And sure, it's been bad. Only 3 games of more than 15 fantasy points this year, but this is a second half of the season thing. I'd rather swing on the elite talent I know with Davante Adams, and now that we know Josh McDaniels is out, look, I'm a believer in the new life with the new head coach. So this is where I think Davante Adams should fall. And look, I don't blame it if people are like, "Nah, Davante Adams shouldn't even be touched in the first 3 rounds." I also understand that argument, but he's too good of a talent to not take here. So I think that's where I have to lean.
Yeah. I'm going to go a guy who's been injured a little bit. I'm going to go David Montgomery here.
Yep.
I think as much as I want it to be Jahmyr Gibbs at all times, as much as, Jahmyr Gibbs has proven over the last couple of games that it could be him at all times, I think Dave Montgomery's role in this offense is just so, usage-wise, is just so elite. He's a guy who's going to be averaging 20 touches a game anytime they're inside the 5. They're just going to run up the middle with David Montgomery, and he's going to, if he gets you 20 rushes for 85 yards and a touchdown every single game for the rest of the season, I would not be shocked in the slightest. We've seen him like in that Packer game. He had 32 rush attempts, just ridiculous. And so, yeah, I think right here he's probably that fringe, running back 2, running back 1 that, it's just going to be so solid to plug in your lineup and know you got something, consistent every single week.
This is exactly where I had David Montgomery. I don't disagree at all. He would have been my next pick as well. Part of it is, he's been injured, but man, when he's been on the field, he has been really dang good. Has been giving you fantasy points. So yeah, no, I agree 100%. That's where I would have gone as well. Look, I'm going back to certainty because at this point, again, we're taking wide receivers who are either have concerns around them or haven't been involved, or you can mix up a variety of reasons, but I'm going to take the other quarterback who's been averaging 20 plus fantasy points per game this year, and that is Justin Herbert, who is also in the MVP running this year. I'll keep it at that. I think this is the point where if you're going to guarantee me 20 points at one of my positions and everybody else in the league isn't at 20 points, I think this is the range where Justin Herbert should be going. In an ideal world, I think you and I agree this is where Josh Allen should probably go in drafts at the start of the year. But at this point, give me the 20 plus instead of a bunch of guys who I still have question marks around.
Yeah, I would agree. It's right now I'm really struggling. I'm going to tell you the guy I really want to take, but I'm not going to, and that's Devon Achane. I'm not going to take him, but I really want to just because we see those 3 games were crazy. And I think Lucas is going to take him for me. So I won't talk about him anymore. I just can't physically do it. Just knowing that it's week 9, he's only played 3 games, but I won't blame you when you do. And man, I'm looking at my list. I'm just going to give you a couple. I got Cooper Kupp on my list. I got Bijan Robinson on my list.
Yep.
Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk, Kenneth Walker. I got a whole bunch of guys that I could throw in here, and I just don't feel great about throwing any of them in here now. No. At all. Who I think I'm going to go with, honestly, is, man, I really don't know where I want to go here.
You can take Achane if you want. I'll say my argument.
I don't want to. I don't. Because it just I can't with the amount of games he's played. I think. Wow. I'm gonna take. 1 second. Let me make sure.
Make sure.
I'm gonna take Cooper Kupp here.
Okay. And I don't blame you one bit.
And the reasoning, obviously, missed 4 games. Obviously, the last couple of games have been disappointing. Still has 2 25 plus point games. We know how great he is. This is a bet on the second half of the year of him, getting a bye week, him and Stafford getting, back to full, being ready to go. I think obviously the hamstring took him a little bit to get back from. And so, yeah, I think with the uncertainty, like with those guys I mentioned, Jahmyr Gibbs is another. I was surprised. Jahmyr Gibbs averaging 16 fantasy points a game. Obviously, it's been elevated by the last 2 weeks, but I still think, he's another guy that who knows how he's going to finish. But I think Cooper Kupp is the one guy that we know how great he is and what he can do. So I'm going to bet on that rest of the season.
The accuracy has just been so bad. Set over the last 3 weeks, 7 targets, 2 receptions, 10 targets, 4 receptions, 7 targets, 2 receptions. That's going to change.
Yes.
that cannot be that bad the rest of the season, especially when he went, 8 on 12 targets for 118 and 7 on 9 for 148 his first 2 games back.
Yeah.
That there is no way that doesn't improve. So you're right. Cooper Kupp might be the steal here. But again, considering he missed the first 4 games, it's been a pretty bad last 3 weeks. It's the things you bake in, not knowing what's coming in the second half of the season. So
for sure,
I 100% agree. But look, Devon Achane is my pick here. This is where I have him ranked. I didn't have him going any lower than this. This is precisely where I had him, was at 30. Actually, technically I had him at 29. I did not have Cooper Kupp ahead of him. I'm trying to find Devon Achane in Sleeper here. Psych, there he is. I got to search for him. Right. Here's the thing about Devon Achane. I'm mostly backing up drafting Jonathan Taylor at 312, 310, as I did in one of my leagues this year. And I had no clue if the man was going to play. Jonathan Taylor could have sat out the whole year, and I took him at the 310. What I know for sure is that when Devon Achane has been on the football field in all his one game where he got one carry, but after that, the RB1, the RB4, the RB4, no fewer than 20 fantasy points in those games, 140 plus point game. Again, you tell me coming after the bye, he could be the lead back. He is worth the risk here for me compared to everybody else I am looking at. He is worth the risk because he is the ultimate home run at the running back position. Like other guys I had the Olaves, the Ayuks, I had DJ Moore on my board, who lead target getter once Justin Fields comes back and obviously went on a crazy 3-game stretch there. I had Michael Pittman, who's been nothing short of consistent this year. Lead target getter, right around that 14, 15 fantasy point range. I had Mike Evans as well. I mean, guys been putting up 20 plus fantasy points. We didn't think that was possible with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
But I'm going to swing for the fences here because I'm not playing to be safe in these leagues now at this point. Like at this point, let's swing for the fence.
For sure.
Because this is going to be the dead zone coming up for wide receivers, for running backs. It would have been in drafts this year. So yeah, I'm going to swing for the fences. I know it's only been 3 games, but you know what? I took Jonathan Taylor here and there was a legit chance he didn't play at all during the season here. So if a guy is worth it when he has 3 top 5 finishes in his 3 starts, that's worth it to me here. And I'm going to swing for the fences because, man, has that dude looked explosive with the ball in his hands. And again, the Dolphins are going to be in a crap ton of games where they're going to need to score points to keep up with defenses. And Devon Achane is going to be a part of that game plan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we're like we talked about it, Eckler, Hall, some of these guys could be like, what are we doing? Take him. Achane's going to be that guy of, he played 3 games, but man, if there's any running back right now who could, really keep up with Christian McCaffrey, it's Achane. If there's anyone who could average 25 points a game, it's Achane. Right now with the way he plays, with the way they use him. So I don't disagree with it. And honestly, like we were saying, if he plays 5 games, he's a for sure, second, probably a first round pick. It's just the fact that he had only played 3 games.
100% agree. Quick, let's wrap up with this. Who else did you have on your list that didn't get drafted?
I had Bijan Robinson.
Yep.
Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Brandon Ayuk. I went out to 36. So those were guys that I was all considering with these last couple of picks.
Yeah, had we gone out to 36, I think the only other names you didn't bring up were DJ Moore, Michael Pittman.
I had those 2 as well. I just missed their names on
there. Yeah. But I mean, again, like Bijan, first round pick. Oh, look, he's not even in the first 30 picks now. It's crazy to see how the landscape of fantasy football shakes up over the course of the season because the first 3 rounds looked nothing like this to start the year. So we thought this would be a fun exercise to retake ourselves through to see, where do we think players can go in the second half of the season, but how do we also evaluate them properly based on the first half of the season and what is then to come because of that as well? So I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this exercise. What did you think?
It was fun. I know this is definitely gonna be a yearly thing moving forward.
I 100% agree. It's got to be like a mid-year review kind of a thing, like a mid-year annual report on these players. I'm bummed Ty couldn't be here because I'm sure he would have added a little more extra flavor to it, but we'll have to make sure he gets roped in on next year's. Anything you want to add before we sign off here?
I think this is why you buy low. We're talking about some guys, Chris Olave, Bijan Robinson. They're definitely guys who could be on here that you're looking to buy low rest of the season if you believe in their talent. Obviously, don't buy low on someone if you don't believe in their talent. Because if their situation's been bad, their talent's not great, then obviously it's not going to change. But I think this is the time where you really buy low on some of these guys who could really explode second half of the year. Cooper Kupp even would be a great example.
Right. Cooper Kupp would be a phenomenal acquisition here as well as he goes into the buy. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Though, if you're listening on the audio version, make sure you're subscribed over there. Make sure you turn on those notifications. And hey, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice little review, we appreciate that. We love hearing from you all, hearing how we can improve on the show. Even I'm not saying you have to leave a 5-star review. I mean, don't trash us. Don't bring our reviews down.
Don't leave anything lower than 4, but
don't leave. Yeah, right. There's an exception there. If you leave anything lower than 4, I mean, we'll just block you. I mean, we'll figure out
Well,
figure out what all your social handles are, and they'll be blocked forever. No, but we appreciate your support over there. If you're watching over on YouTube, again, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you turn on those post notifications. That's so important, because when those post notifications are on, you're going to know when all of our new video content is up. You're going to get alerted when this podcast first comes out every single week. You're going to be alerted when our newest YouTube videos come out, when our newest shorts come out, and that is daily. There is daily content. We go live on Sundays. You'll be alerted when we go live on Sundays. So make sure your post notifications are turned on over on YouTube, and that you're subscribed to the channel. And while you're at it, make sure you follow us on the other socials as well. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas here on YouTube, and then Facebook and TikTok as well. And if you want to give our personals a follow as well, we think we're pretty funny. We think we provide enough education and humor on our personals. I'm at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, Camlaw FFF for Cameron. Thanks again for tuning in. We will see you later this week to preview every single start-sit decision you need to make in Week 10 of the NFL season. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. Oh my gosh, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all later. Deuces.